Hello, everyone. Welcome to Building a Better Street Together, the fourth and final in this webinar series. I'm Lindsay Wallace. I'm the Director of Strategic Projects and Design Services at Main Street America. Today, on this final of the four webinars, we're focusing on building research, building partnerships, and building a vision, reflecting the content in Chapter 3 of the toolkit. First off, we'd like to thank each of you for your interest, for your participation in this webinar series and this toolkit in general. We're really glad to have had your participation over the last couple of weeks. We'd also like to offer our deepest appreciation to the Ann T. and Robert M. Bass Foundation, whose generous support has made today possible, this toolkit possible. We wouldn't be here without them, so a huge thank you to them. You're hearing me here on the left, Lindsay Wallace, and I'm joined today by my colleagues at the Project for Public Spaces, Laura Torchio, Shaylee Zog, Jackson Chabot, and we'll have some special guests, which we'll talk about in just a second. But just very quick housekeeping notes for you. Today is the last of the four in this four-part series, but you can always go back and watch on our homepage at www.mainstreet.org/navigating Main Streets. All of the recorded webinars are there. You can also access the recorded webinars via your registration link that you clicked to get here. The recordings on our homepage are YouTube channel links, and you can share those widely. You don't need a registration to get in that. During this webinar, there is a question box in your control panel there on your right for you to type in any questions you have. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the hour where I'll read the questions aloud. If, as you're putting in your questions, you could put who you are directing the question to and what your question is, that would help us direct the questions as we get to that point. If you're seeking AAA credits, just like before, please submit your name and your member number via the Google form linked there. It's also in the assignment PDF, which is in the handouts box there on the right-hand side in that control panel. Also in the follow-up email, you'll receive a PDF that has this Google form link as well. If you're seeking AICP credits, they're also available via self-report. So before we get started in today's agenda, I just wanted to make a call back to those of you who did submit some assignments via our assignments from last week. So thank you so much for doing that. For those of you who didn't, hopefully it'll be helpful as you move forward with your work. So in this assignment from last week, we asked you to identify what impact area you selected based on those 6 impact areas we talked about earlier in the series, and then which nuts and bolts streetscape element, and then who do you believe you need to partner with? So these are some maps of the answers we received. So thanks to our listeners in Concord, North Carolina and Tampa, Florida, just as an example. So, this is a really great example of how all of these elements need to happen in order to build out our collective vision. But of course, and especially in the way we talk today about stakeholder engagement and community visioning, that if during the engagement process, during the visioning process, we find that other solutions may work better than the ones we had anticipated at the beginning, we want to be nimble and be able to change course and update the vision accordingly. So all of the folks that you've listed out here as needed to be involved in this kind of conversation around sidewalks, crosswalk bump outs, other kinds of nuts and bolts streetscape elements we want to implement, we want to make sure that in the planning process that we remain nimble and open. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Laura and Shaylee to kick us off in the meat of today's webinar.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. This is Laura Torchio, and I'm really happy to be here helping to facilitate today's last webinar in our Navigating Main Streets as Places Master Course. Today's focus is building a better street together. Today's agenda will focus on the 3rd chapter of the toolkit, but primarily we'll take a deep dive into the story of Hailey, Idaho, and how this community worked together to know their street, know their people, and build a plan to get things done. And to tell the story, today we have Cameron Ellis, owner of Ground Truth Geographics and formerly of Community Builders, Kaz Thea from the Hailey City Council, and Brian Yeager, the Hailey Director of Public Works. To lead you in, we'll start with a toolkit recap and Chapter 3 overview by Shaylee Zog. Go ahead, Shaylee.
Hello, everyone. Since today is our final webinar, I'm sure many of you are familiar with our themes by this point, but I'll just provide some rapid-fire highlights from the series and share how this final chapter fits within the full story. So you'll be able to see how the Haley case study is a really great story of how all the themes come together. We've talked about streets as places, the idea that our streets can be so much more than the roadway and can benefit our lives through more than just getting us from point A to point B. Now that we'll be featuring a little bit about community builders in this webinar, I wanted to highlight that this base graphic comes from the Colorado Downtown Streets Guide, which they helped to bring to life. This is a very helpful guide available online, and it also expands on the Streets as Places philosophy and makes it actionable, which is what we hope that you all might do. We hope that you can put Streets as Places into action by challenging all of your partners to see your streets in their entirety, to see the full vitality they can provide. This philosophy shapes the story we hope to tell and shapes how we hope you might use this full toolkit. Here's a quick recap. We introduced the toolkit in the first webinar and talked about how you could access the different parts of that toolkit. Then we answered why does transportation matter for Main Streets and why all these costs and benefits of streets impact and overlap with each other. Then last week we heard some stories about what created People First Streets for 3 different communities. And now we are going to talk about how we might actually build a better street together. And this is a chapter that really ties our story together because it directly addresses all our other overarching value of getting everyone and everything to talk together. Talking together is a recurring theme for us because we know that street initiatives do require leadership and action at all levels to succeed. And we know that valuing the life expertise of all community partners can mean stronger streets as places for everybody. This value is tied to how the toolkit tools might be put to use together. It's tied to how the chapters play off of each other. It's showcased in the way that all the cost-benefit impact areas discussed in Chapter 1 overlap with each other. It's relevant to how all the streetscape elements and strategies we reviewed in Chapter 2 should talk together. And now Chapter 3 directly provides the actionable talking points and ideas for how all types of leaders can talk to and work with each other, all in an effort to build a better street together. Chapter 3 of the toolkit is where those whys of Chapter 1 and the whats of Chapter 2 get connected to each other because both chapters provide the background knowledge and inspiration that allows you and your partners to speak the same language when it comes to advocating for your streets and transportation systems. This chapter was organized into 3 different sections, all with different types of tools for helping you navigate how to do things. Both the first and second sections talk about ways in which you build up the knowledge and partnerships that will help you get things done through visioning and implementation strategies, which are then discussed in the final section of the chapter. I just want to briefly mention that much of this chapter comes from the aligned and complementary ways that Project for Public Spaces and Main Street America focus on community collaboration and the power of people and places. So all of the evaluation, collaboration, and implementation suggestions come from our aligned ways of thinking. Please take a look at our toolkit for the tips we share on building knowledge through background research and street evaluation, on building partnerships through stakeholder identification and engagement methods, and on building a plan together with clear vision alignment and iterative implementation. All of these topics are meant to support the dialogues you are already having or help you know how to start up new conversations. In fact, we have built in a lot of possible questions you can be asking each other, so take a look at that in the toolkit. Now we're going to have a quick opportunity to do a mini virtual dialogue with us through a final interactive activity of the series. So we are going to pull up Mentimeter. This time we're asking you what part of the process of building a better street is. Why are only 2 showing? Okay. Sorry about that. So please let us know kind of the different things, and you'll notice if you type in 242958 into menti.com, you'll be able to kind of select where your community is. We know that there's nuances to the steps, and sometimes there's steps taken in between, or sometimes you can have multiple steps happening all at once, so feel free to select more. If you happen to not be able to open the link up right now, feel free to add some comments in the question box or come back to this page after the webinar, since it will still be available for a few days after. I'll provide just a few more seconds for people to input their answers, but again, this will be available after. So we hope you enjoy these kind of interactive moments that we've all come across, been doing throughout the webinar series. And we hope you've seen them on social media as we've been showing them in the past few weeks. Now I'm going to transition us back so that we can hear the story of Hailey, Idaho, and how they navigated all of the processes of the Chapter 3 together. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Jackson to help facilitate that conversation.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be back. This is Laura again. Just a little bit of background. In 2015, funded by the Lohr Foundation, Project for Public Spaces and Community Builders with Hailey stakeholders kicked off a placemaking process on Hailey's Main Street, also known as State Highway 75. And we heard from several of you that state highways as main streets have a host of challenges. The folks in Hailey, Idaho share your concerns. The community-led place-based ideas that emerged from the placemaking initiative resulted in an implementation plan which spanned beyond Main Street and which the residents subsequently voted for a tax levy to fund. Today we have Cameron Ellis, Kaz Thea, and Brian Yeager to share the Hailey story of where they started, what they've done since then, and where they're headed. And as I mentioned before, this project is exemplary of how working together on a shared vision is key to success. So now I hand off the mic to Jackson Chabot.
Thanks, Laura. Today we're pleased to have these three phenomenal panelists with us to speak about their experience with the Hailey, Idaho project. Throughout this section, you'll be hearing their voices and you'll be seeing various images from the project and from Hailey, Idaho. If you have specific questions for either the panelists or about some of the pictures, as Lindsay said earlier, please submit those in the question box and please include what you're referencing. After our interview with them, we're going to host a Q&A session, and we'd love to field your questions then. So we're going to start off with a lightning round, and we're going to have introductions from each of the panelists by themselves. We're going to start with Kaz, and I'd like you to introduce yourself by telling the audience what your role was then, what your role is now, and what your preferred mode of transportation for getting around Hailey is. Kaz, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm Kaz Thea, and when this project first started, I was the Bike Ped program manager for Mountain Rides, the community public transportation organization here. And today I'm serving almost the end of my second year as Hailey City Council, elected in 2007, started in 2008. My favorite mode of transportation is biking on actually one of our new streets, the 2nd Avenue bike path that we created a year ago. And it ties in 2nd Avenue, which parallels Main Street and runs north-south. And it connects our middle school with our elementary school. We put 2 new bike lanes on. So I love using that to get into town.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaz. Brian, up to you.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Brian Yeager. I'm the Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Hailey. I've been here about a year and a half. And my preferred mode of transportation is I actually really enjoy walking everywhere that I can whenever climate or time will allow. And whenever I need to get to a further distant area, or if it's, snow and I need to carry equipment and so forth, then usually I'll either drive, although in the summertime I'll occasionally do biking if I have a bike, here at City Hall.
Thanks for sharing it, Brian. Cameron, what about you? And for this context for the audience, could you also include what your role was at the time and how you've been involved with community builders?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Cameron Ellis, and at the time of this project, I was a project manager with Community Builders. I was and still am a resident of Hailey, Idaho. So I have a sort of special connection to both the work of community builders and this place. And for people who aren't familiar with Community Builders, it's a nonprofit based in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, that works throughout the Intermountain West to help communities become more vibrant, have stronger economies, more resilient community fabric, primarily through access to planning and other resources that are often hard to find in the Intermountain West. I currently do not work with Community Builders and don't want to speak for them. They might find me and drag me into an alley and beat me up if they do, but I'll do my best to sort of represent what they're up to these days. And I currently work or own a small mapping and multimedia production company still here in Haley, Idaho.
Wonderful.
Oh,
thank you,
favorite mode
everyone.
of transportation?
Yeah,
That's right. Sorry. If I can't be skiing, you'll find me on a bicycle.
Good. I was hoping someone would say snowshoeing or skiing, cross-country skiing through downtown, but that's close enough. So as we move towards the project here, I'm really curious as we start this off, Kaz, could you tell us about where this started from your experience in the community with the Bike Ped group and how that really, the origin story for us?
Yeah, so I was on a committee that was writing a Bike Ped master plan as the Bike Ped program manager for Mountain Rides. And we headed up that plan. And during that period of time, Cameron approached me and the planner for the city of Haley, the director of planning for city of Haley, to submit a grant to see if we could get someone out here to help us through a revisioning of Haley Main Street to increase vitality of our city, knowing that Main Street is a state highway that sees a lot of traffic, and understanding that Main Street isn't all that safe. We had a few accidents crossing Main Street, and it definitely comes across to a lot of citizens that it's a challenge getting across 5 lanes of highway, 2 travel lanes, a center turn lane, and 2 travel lanes in both directions. So Cameron encouraged us to apply for a grant, which the city led, and I helped Lisa Horowitz and others at the city write and submit the grant. And we were lucky enough to receive the grant and have Project for Public Spaces come out and work with us in 2015 in December to bring the community together for this revisioning workshop.
That's great to hear. And so as you formulated that, how did the team come together? You said Cameron approached you and you collaborated with the right people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, this was before I was city council, but I do a lot in our community. I volunteer. I ran the farmers markets here for 13 years, and I'm very, very connected to the community. So we did as much outreach to our local community to say, we're providing this 3-day workshop. We want the community to take ownership of coming out and looking at how we can revision our community for increased vitality and a better, safer Main Street, State Highway 75. And so we did just as much outreach as we possibly could to friends, to business owners, to stakeholders, to just as many different, to the nonprofit organizations, to as many different communities as we could. And we got a tremendous outpouring of support for this 3-day workshop. And the first evening, this slide is showing Cameron talking at the first evening. We held it at the Sustainability Center. We did offer food and drinks there to attract more people, but there were at least 65 people that showed up, and we considered that to be phenomenal. And, we got into great discussions, and people didn't want to leave. It was done after 2 hours, and people were sticking around, stay longer, and put dots on maps of, some of the highlights of what works in our community and where we need a lot of work in the future for increased safety and better mobility. So we really got a great turnout. The next day we did a field trip, and a lot of people turned out to go look at these sites that we put up on maps and discussed at that evening meeting. And we started this tremendous momentum with building a better, safer Haley for our community. And it was really community driven from that first meeting.
That's great. And so Cameron, from your perspective, how did you conduct a lot of that background research, building into the street evaluation, and really on that collective community process that Kaz was just telling us about?
Yeah, so, I, as an employee of Community Builders at that time, had the opportunity to see what a number of small towns that were very similar to Haley were doing to address this pervasive problem of highway or Main Street as a state highway. So I had an opportunity to see a bunch of stuff that was going on outside of Haley, and I feel like that was sort of a key piece of research, because often we don't sort of know what's out there until if you don't see it. So after having sort of those experiences in other communities, we came back, and if I recall correctly, we did traffic counts at several key points along Main Street. We did interviews with people. As a resident of Haley, I also was able to just talk to a lot of people in the community. At the time, I had small children and knew a lot of other people with small children, and was able to sort of gauge their level of concern about the community. And so I feel like there was a certain amount of research that was quantitative, related to traffic and related to sort of the nuts and bolts of engineering. But then there was a lot of qualitative research that was done by myself and other people involved in the project. And so I think that once the project really got going, we had a very strong understanding of what people's concerns were, and their level of concern, compared to other things that they might be concerned about. I think that we also did a community survey, like a Google Forms type survey, and sent that out to a bunch of people. So we got a bunch of information back about people's concerns. And one thing that Kaz mentioned, and I'll just reiterate, is we did a very disciplined and heavy kind of outreach to people in our community. Haley's a town of about 10,000 people, and every single one of us used every one of the nodes on our personal networks to try to get people engaged. And I think that was really important for the background research, because too often these things sort of, if they don't have people personally getting out there and trying to get people engaged, it's just not going to happen. Too many people have other things to do in the evening, and don't have the time to engage in this sort of work. So I feel like the engagement started with the research.
Definitely. So on the slide right now, we have the interactive video up from Spencer Boomhauer. Cameron, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were fortunate enough to work with a firm based out of Oregon that did sort of street interactive street visualizations. What you're seeing right now is sort of a fly through of Haley's Main Street as it is, and the reality is you could land a jumbo jet on this street. And so what this firm did, I believe it was Cupola Media, they had I can't remember the software that they used, but it was a video game software that they could sort of put different street configurations into, and viewers could not just watch a movie, but could sort of toggle through these different scenarios and compare them, from different angles, from different camera points of view, just to see sort of what would the street look and feel like in real time. And we had this up and running at one of our sort of winter events. A lot of this particular the outreach was done in the middle of a really heavy winter here in Idaho, so we had tons of snow on the ground, and the streets kind of looked different than they do in these videos, but everyone was familiar with it, and it really gave people an opportunity to see that there are options out there. There are different sort of configurations working with the, whatever the right of way was. There were so many different things that could be done with it. And these options ranged from really ambitious, really aggressive, cutting out lanes and putting all kinds of stuff out on the street, to options that were less aggressive. And I think that the response to that was, people had sort of responses to the specific configurations, but there was a big sense of, I think a lot of people in our community felt like there was nothing that could be done about Main Street, that it was what it was, and short of some massive overhaul that involved routing traffic on other streets or something, that there was no way to sort of deal with the conditions on Main Street in a step-by-step manner. And this kind of opened people's minds a little bit to the range of options that are out there for small communities like Haley.
That's phenomenal. It leads me to our next point with Kaz. Working through stakeholder identification and engagement, which you and Cameron just talked about a little bit, one of the examples I came across was the parklet that you guys installed. And so with you and Brian, can you speak about how that process occurred? Because what you guys did from my research was talking to these different stakeholders and how to make this happen. And so can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. I'll start. What we did was we set up meetings, small group meetings with business owners and the nonprofit community, citizens at large. The business community was really key, and other committee members for the tree committee and the historic committee. And so we had these small stakeholder meetings where we talk about different ideas of how to make Haley downtown more of with greater vitality and greater safety, and how that would either improve or detract from, depending on their viewpoints, the business successes, and how to really identify what their concerns were, what their visions were, and if they had ideas on how to improve things. And one of the first things that came out was some of the tools that Project for Public Spaces provided to us, the quicker, lighter, what is it called? Quicker, lighter, cheaper. Yeah. Sorry about that. But one of the things that came out of that was creating a parklet. And so we had a business, the theater in town right on Main Street, say, we would love to do a parklet. And this is where I think ITD, the transportation department, has kind of softened on their hard stance that nothing can happen to be flexible on Highway 75 Main Street, because at first they put up a little bit of a wall to a parklet, taking up some parking spaces, 2.5, 3 parking spaces, and building out a little deck and seating places and flowers for people to hang out, to show ways that you can expand your sidewalk, and how would that feel for people. And they really, in the end, let us do it. So I think they've softened. If it's a real strong urge of the community to get something like that put in, then they seem to be warming up to those ideas. So that was one thing we did, and now every summer that parklet in front of the Liberty Theater goes in, and when we have special events there, food trucks pull up, and there are a lot of people gathering at that parklet and sitting out and eating before some kind of play or performance going on at the theater. And we think it's great. I would personally love to see more of them. One in front of, we have 2 restaurants that are next to each other, one in front of one of those restaurants or both of those restaurants, because it really does allow people to gather on the sidewalk. We have such great weather here, and I think people crave that, but we just need more room on our sidewalks. And there's a lot of lighter, quicker, cheaper ideas that one could implement without a huge investment to kind of test these ideas on your streets. You want to take it from here, Brian?
No, I comment, the benefit of being in a small community is we know each of the individuals that we need to reach out to try to help coordinate responses and get feedback on where we're trying to go. So we're really in touch with each of the local individuals, and that allows us to truly try to cater what we're trying to do specifically to help out the community as best as possible. And then to kind of second what Kaz said on the parklet is it's been tremendously successful in repurposing basically, those parking areas on an as-needed basis, where it can really try to recapture that back for the pedestrian environment, particularly around a key event center or a restaurant or something along those lines.
Thank you. That's great. Cameron, can you build off of that, and can you tell us a bit about coming through the collective vision and perhaps how the parklet was both a process portion but also an implementation piece as well?
Yeah, so, this was, I think all of us who were sort of involved in the project on an organizational side had our vision for what we wanted to see Haley look like, and I'm sure everyone listening in kind of has their ideas about what they want something to look like. But we really approached this from not a solution standpoint, but sort of a let's identify some of the problems standpoint, and then let that guide us to the solutions. So the way we sort of started the public engagement was just by doing a typical classic place mapping exercise where people would put dots or scratch in on a map places where they felt unsafe on the streets, places where they felt like they couldn't necessarily make a connection that they wanted to make, and after we got a couple beers in people, we had a lot of people sort of opening up about their concerns about the community, all of the things that weren't working, and hundreds of points on a map of a pretty small town, and we also through that process were able to see which of these problems are problems for many people, which of them are sort of isolated problems. And that's kind of how we started the discussion. And that allowed everyone to, not jump directly into what's the best solution for Main Street, but kind of jump into a common vision or a common sort of value statement for the things that they felt like needed to be changed. And once we had that, we sort of worked on it, and that's where people started throwing out their ideas for what were the best possible solutions for some of these challenges, and across many of those, everybody had different solutions, but or many people had different solutions, but there were some very common themes that emerged through that process. So throughout the whole thing, we just really tried to focus on, these are the common themes that kind of tie everyone together and try to make it very inclusive. And I think that sort of spirit is what kept the process going after after all the engagement was done. I think that as Brian mentioned, being in a small town really helps with some of that, because I run into the same people at the grocery store, and after this event, I think all of us who were involved in it were able to sort of keep those discussions alive afterwards, just by being out there and being present and being sort of members of a small community where you can talk to someone in the checkout line or at the cafe or whatever it is. And through that, we were able to kind of keep those discussions going. And we'll get to this later in the webinar, I think, but convert those sort of common themes and common values and new ideas into success, both in fundraising and in a local levy and a handful of other sort of community decisions that were made here in Haley.
That's a great point, especially with the levy and from a funding perspective. Brian, can you talk a bit about that funding process, and specifically, can you add on any metrics that you all have used to measure or evaluate your progress?
Sure. So the Main Street focus, obviously that kind of grew as time went on, where we're trying to enhance the pedestrian experience on Main Street, but also it became apparent that we have, but we always knew this, we have this Wood River Trail, this main recreational bike ped trail that kind of goes through town approximately 5 blocks to the east. And as we're looking at Main Street, one of the other things that became apparent is that connectivity from that trail into downtown in an east-west direction rather than that trail which runs north and south, that connectivity became a key point of interest. And basically what we did is we had several meetings on that, but ultimately we went out to the voters and we said, would you as a group, the citizens of Haley, support, trying to enhance additional pedestrian connectivity from that trail to our downtown core? And would you support an $800,000 levy? And it came back overwhelmingly yes, and that worked out really well. And then we used that money a portion of that money to leverage as matching funds to a TAP grant, or a Transportation Alternatives Program grant, and picked up another $500,000 there. So the combination of those two allowed us to create some different projects, a Croy Street project, a Second Avenue project, a Myrtle Street project and one more project that's pending yet, to really try to increase that connectivity. And then from a Main Street standpoint, there was also, local establishments that were trying to support the parklets and items like that. And then we've also had discussions, and they continue to be ongoing a little bit, somewhat about road diets on State Highway 75. Although that's a challenge at times. We have a challenging road scenario in that we have a lot of traffic going through there, about 17,000 vehicles per day during the peak month. And whenever it's not peak month, it comes back to winter time, we have a significant snow removal challenge too. So Main Street is a real challenge for us to get that to work, and we're approaching it very carefully. As far as metrics, as far as how we've succeeded, the parklet has been a tremendous success. Everybody has enjoyed that and loves that. And then as far as the side path connectivity to try to bring people into downtown off the Wood River Trail or create this connectivity, the slide in front of you right there, a Croy Street pathway that we had widened, or we used the existing curb lines and restriped that section of road to allow for a bi-directional multi-use path to come through there, bike path, there's a sidewalk right beside it, but to try to get people down to the downtown core there too. And we evaluated this, the success of this based on what our community has provided back to us for feedback. And to date, people have been thrilled to death. They love the parklet. They love trying to see any type of improvements we can make on Main Street, and they certainly love the connectivity that our bike paths and stuff are starting to establish. And although there's a large component of bike ped people within the community, people are still in the process of learning how they can incorporate that into their day-to-day routine. And so we continue to see increased growth on a day-by-day basis. And plus, these facilities allow us a point of communication so that we can point it out, so we can have this common bond or this common denominator of these conversations as we start planning next steps in the process. So they're really kind of the first building block or stone that we're using to build from there.
That's all phenomenal. So, Kaz, the next portion here is phrased as what worked, but we've heard a lot of glows. So I want to hear, what are the challenges that you all have also faced, so we can be realistic with our audience members of the harsh realities that it's not easy.
I think for any community, but particularly smaller communities, funding is, very challenging. I don't want people to see it as a complete barrier, because you really do have to think outside the box. You have to get creative, and you have to engage your community. But funding is always a challenge. Certainly Main Street, this is a shot on Main Street, and we have this huge parade. I don't know when this picture was exactly taken, but I'm thinking it's during the 4th of July parade that comes up and down Main Street. And thousands of people, thousands and thousands gather here and get their front row seats for the parade. But it is a main highway avenue between our, going up and down the valley, north to south. And it's really the one area that connects the one state highway that connects all the communities in a north-south direction. And so, working with ITD is a challenge, although like I said, they're really softening their tone. And if the community feels very, very strongly, and you have identified with community support, creative things that you can do on the state highway, and I'm excited that they're coming to resurface this highway, and we're going to start engaging in conversations of, can we repaint this so it's a little bit better for pedestrians, and not spend a whole lot of money and do some testing along the highway through paint. Maybe there's some opportunity coming up, because they are coming to do the work in 2021. And the other thing I would say is we engaged the community, and when you have strong backing by the community, and we did that not only through the workshops, but through online surveys and open houses all through the process. And the online surveys showed us clearly what streets came up as high priority for creating pathways. And so the 3 highest priorities we've now implemented those pathways and used that levy money. And if you get the support from the community, you get that ownership, they show up to meetings, they can soften what the blockages are with your state highway transportation. district. Anyway, there definitely are some challenges, but I don't want anybody to think that they are complete blockage, because there are creative things you can do to work with your community, with your ITD transportation department, to get around some of these challenges that we meet. And the other thing I want to say is I at one time thought maybe a couplet would be nice, where we could do a serious road diet on Main Street and have a one-way traffic going north on Main Street, and the street to the west, River Street, have one-way traffic going south. I don't now like that idea, because I want to keep all the truck traffic and everything off of River Street, because in the future we have a little bit of money to improve River Street and really make it the north-south bike ped pathway through that runs parallel to Main Street the entire way, and through the downtown core. And maybe we keep all the big time traffic off that road, and that in the future becomes our bike ped route. And maybe eventually, cafes and restaurants will open up as well on Main Street. There's great opportunities. So where you see blockage and problems, you might see opportunities in other parts of your city that you weren't thinking about at the onset.
Can I just add a really quick challenge to what Kaz said? One thing that I think we didn't mention at the outset is a little bit of context of where Haley is. And Haley is about 12 miles down the road from the Ketchum Sun Valley Resort Complex. And so there's a really big sort of, in our valley, there's some sort of competing forces. And one of the really big challenges is that there's lots of interest in just moving traffic through Haley to get people to these resorts. It's the only way to get to these resorts. And so we faced also some pushback from sort of the resort economic development side of things. And, that's kind of the counterpoint to those of us who live in Haley and see Haley as a place to live and see Main Street as Main Street. We really have sort of differing visions, I think, from the people who see this as just kind of like a tourist area, and Haley is just a thing that you have to get through to get to the tourist amenities. And I don't know how many people on this call face that problem, but it's really pervasive across the West in communities that are near big resort areas.
And actually, when I ran for city council, just as an aside, one of my main platform statements was, I want Haley to be a place that people go to rather than go through.
That's phenomenal. Speaking our language, and I think what you all are talking about is talking together, whether it's talking with the DOT, talking to businesses, talking to the community, and really creating a platform for community change, whether it's from the political end, whether it's from a city administrator end, or a resident end. So our final question from me, before I pass it over to Laura, is another lightning round. So we're curious, what makes Haley's streets feel like places that put people first? And then in addition, / in combination with that, what are your favorite things about Haley today? Kaz, you're first.
What makes Haley streets feel like places that put people first? I think that we have some gathering places through our community. And I think our challenge that we faced was how to get people moving through to gather at the places so then they can go out and enjoy the city. And we have a lot of parks. Some are accessed really close to our downtown. And we have kind of a few restaurants that have decks on the outside. And I think there's one on Main Street actually that's beyond the sidewalk, and it's on the sidewalk and beyond into the business. And I think people gather there. We have a lot of concerts that we do throughout town, and people gather to listen to these outdoor concerts that connect our city life with people, with places that people gather. And then when we were doing our Second Avenue and our new pathway areas, building them the last couple of years, it was a challenge to get the neighborhood to say, oh, you want to take out the center line on this road? That scares me. Like, how are people going to know where to travel? And so we created this road that had 2 lines of traffic into a one traffic lane and 2 bike paths on either side. And we took out the center lane, and the people in that neighborhood now love that street. It slowed it down. It connected the middle school to the elementary school, and it's been a great success, I think.
Thanks for sharing, Kaz. Brian, what about you?
Well, I think what makes the streets feel like places to put people first is that the local businesses or the people that live on those streets basically trying to open their doors or their businesses to the public and trying to invite them in. And by having the city try to facilitate sidewalks, pathways, try to dampen the traffic and that kind of stuff, to slow people down so that they take note of these places, and it creates all these little micro gathering places for people to just interact. To give it a more human scale. And then in addition to that, we're really trying to focus on other gathering places. Like, we've got a big push right now. We're trying to work our way through a town square project, which is a huge project that we're really trying to undertake. It's very expensive, but it's an investment in the future. It's something that, we're tasked with every day, is trying to say, if we look back on today, 20 years from now, what will it be that we wish that we had done? And right now, we really want to see this town square idea move forward. We're really pushing that. The favorite things about Haley is, we do have a very dominant traffic peak during morning AM, PM commute hours. The rest of the time, it's actually the traffic is fairly comfortable. And just the ability to walk around town and enjoy the human scale. I mean, you're not encumbered by the noise of the automobile for quite a bit of it. It's a natural outdoor environment. It's very pleasant to be around in, yet it provides a tremendous amount of amenity that you wouldn't get in most towns of this size, just because of the sophistication or the fact it's a resort destination. Our challenge does lie in the fact that we are a black box with a hose coming in and a hose going out. And that hose coming in and hose going out is Main Street, that is State Highway 75. In order for anybody to move any traffic north and south for near 60 to 100 plus miles, they have to pass through our Main Street. And 17,000 vehicles per day is difficult when it goes through the middle of your town. And so we continue to try to focus and try to find ways to get better. But that's complicated by the fact that come winter time, we're also a high mountain town. And last year, if you would have went out there in the middle of during snow removal activities, there'd be a 6-foot high snowbank that'd be plowed to the center of the street, which that two-way center turn lane that we use to store our snow in prior to snow removal. So we have high traffic peaks during certain parts of the day, and then we have significant climatic challenges, which makes Main Street a challenge to try to get it tamed and under control.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Cameron, we're going to transition here really quickly after you, so we just want a quick word on your thoughts there.
Yeah, I'll go really quickly. What makes me feel like the streets put people first is seeing people on the streets. We live in a small town where, my kids come home from school and they head out on their bike, and I don't see them again until dinner time, and not having to worry about them on the streets means everything to me.
That sounds phenomenal. Now we're going to transition back over to Laura, and she's going to ask.
Okay, I got it. Thanks, Jackson, and thank you for all the speakers. I'm going to be really fast, and we're going to treat this one as the lightning round that it really is. So I'm really impressed by everything that everyone's been saying, especially the part about the community owning the project, and your community really has stepped up in a lot of ways, and they're not only supporting these ideas, but they're becoming champions and stewards of this work. So I'm wondering if in a lightning round, 1 or 2 words each, can you share with the listeners, each of you, one key takeaway you would like others to learn from Haley's experiences? And why don't we switch it up, and we'll start with Brian this time, in just a word or 2.
Identify some projects and put it out to the voters. You may be surprised how enthusiastic your voters may be, and that will tell you you're on the right path and charge ahead.
Awesome. All right, and how about Cameron?
Yeah, I think that ultimately cities and towns and the neighborhoods that we live in are personal spaces. And I think that being personal and engaging with other people who share those streets and share those neighborhoods is not something that you can replace. And so I think, getting out there and talking to people and making that engagement happen on a personal level is key.
Great. Okay, so we got voters, we got being personal and engaging, and Kaz, you get the last word.
I think momentum begets momentum. We started with a great idea, got the community engaged, developed partnerships, asked for the input, and went with what they gave us. And then we kept throwing more at our community, and they kept voting yes. And so we started this momentum, and it just keeps going.
That is so, so great. Okay, so we're going to hand it now back to Lindsay Wallace to lead us into the Q&A.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks so much to each of you, Brian, Cameron, and Kaz, for sharing your story. It's riveting, and it's so great to hear from you in this format, just to hear this conversation kind of flow, because we know in this work that nothing really goes the way we think it's going to go, or it doesn't often. So to hear how you course corrected and the people that you engaged, it's really inspiring. So I'm going to go quickly through a couple of things, and we're going to come back to Q&A. So for folks on the phone, if you want to go ahead and type in your questions, we'll get to them in just a second. Cameron, Kaz, and Brian, if you could stay on the line. We have a couple that came in and a lot of stuff that's already been answered, but we'll loop back to get to those in just one sec. So hang tight with me, guys. As you know, this is the last in the 4-part webinar series, and we just wanted to quickly go over the themes from throughout the series just to tie it up to finish the end here. Some quick themes and takeaways. Of course, streets are places. You've heard how that's worked in Haley, how their community leaders have really pulled that together and really put people first. People first streets, of course, can positively impact your community's sense of equity, safety, health, economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and sense of community. Based on those themes from our first chapter, you've really seen the through line, and this story today is another example of how that's worked. Understanding your nuts and bolts, your kind of planning, infrastructure, policy, etc., and building partnerships go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. The point that Shaylee has made about pieces talking together, people talking together, these kinds of things are really important in actually getting projects implemented that are sustainable and impact community positively. Programming and governance are key. So of course, you can't implement something and then just let it go. Somebody has to be on point to maintain it and to program spaces to make sure that people know and feel ownership over those spaces and come down and celebrate them. And then of course, as you've seen throughout this webinar and especially in our conversation about Haley, that building knowledge and building partnerships and building plans are all part and parcel in creating great streets. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the other pieces of the toolkit, the handbook, the online resource library, they are at www.mainstreet.org/navigating main streets. You can watch the recorded webinars there too. Thank you all for participating, for checking it out. We have recently done some stat review, and we've found that we've had 5,000 views on this website and on the handbook. So thank you all for being a part of that and for checking out our work. We were really pleased to be able to do this, and of course, thanks to PPS for being such great partners in that. Next up, so we do have a final assignment. You'll see that in the PDF that's on the handout tab over on the right, and we'll send out the email with it. But essentially, we want to leave you with something as you go forth and prosper here. Looking at what we've done over the webinars and in the toolkit, we want to know how you'll go back to your community and build a better street together. So how you'll take all of this and implement it. So if you want to, you can fill that out in the Google form that's attached to the PDF. We'd love to hear from you on that. We also have a survey that will be going out. It's a separate link that we'll send out in the email as well. For feedback, we'd love to hear what you think about the toolkit, the webinar series, everything. So please fill that out. It's anonymous if you'd like it to be, but we'd love to get some feedback on this. Really appreciate your participation. So now over to the Q&A. As I said, you have the question box over there on the right. In the question, if you could write out who the question is for, and then your question, it'll help us direct it all. So we had a few really good ones come in, and they're mostly for our Haley team. Some of it you've already answered, but maybe even if you've answered it, if you want to go a little deeper. I'll start with this question here that about community engagement. So were the community engagement efforts led by a consultant or a volunteer? Such projects seem very labor intensive.
I can answer that really quickly. I think that certain aspects of them were led by volunteers and community members, and those would be sort of pieces of the engagement that would be difficult for elected officials to do, such as buying kegs of beer to get people to come out and and give their thoughts on things. Other elements of it, setting up spaces for engagement and organizing the charrettes and organizing the sort of more formal interviews with business owners and other stakeholders were led by city officials. So it was a nice division of labor. And I think that, organizations, sort of the support organizations like Community Builders and Project for Public Spaces played a huge role in both of, in sort of bridging both of those two worlds, the sort of official world and the informal, let's be a community and get this done world.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else want to touch on community engagement efforts?
Well, I think, we really had some very specific stakeholder meetings, and officials, city staff and city council both attended, plus mayor attended some of those, and they were well attended by the stakeholders that we addressed, that we wanted to have part of these small, intimate stakeholder meetings. And I think you need a diversity of things. You need also the general public open forums, and you need open houses, and we did surveys. We did a lot of different things to try to really reach as many of the public, whether it be stakeholders, business owners, city officials, etc., as we could, because we really knew that great plans come from community engagement, community thought, community almost design. So we did lots of different things, and it all added to the success of the overall effort of several years of projects.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I mean, your attention to the community engagement piece is inspirational, and really, I think, a huge lesson for all of us to think about when we're thinking about this kind of project. I had a quick one. I know we're running out of time, so I'm wondering if maybe we could end on this one. But a lot of our listeners, a lot of our network is involved in economic development, specifically in main streets, so in those commercial district corridors, as you talked about a lot. And thanks for speaking about the realities in working there. So I wondered if, you touched a bit on economic impacts and retail and store owners and that kind of thing, but I wondered if you could just quickly talk about any kind of economic impacts you're seeing because of this project, or that you can tie to the work that you've done there, if you've seen like a decrease in vacancies downtown or an increase in local entrepreneurship. Just wondering if you could talk a bit about economic impacts.
I will attempt to talk about that really briefly. We don't have very many places that are not filled right now on our main street vacancies. We do have an issue with, restaurants. They change hands a lot, and I really do believe in my heart of hearts, if our sidewalks were larger and more of the restaurants could participate in bringing tables and chairs out and benches and planters and really make it the outside a bigger part of their restaurants, I think there would be greater success. And that's what I'm really trying to get our city to move towards. Again, it's hard when most of those buildings are on Main Street, particularly the ones that require customers to come in and sit down. We have great weather here, and I think we could take better advantage of it if we had more tables and chairs. Some of the businesses bring out their wares and sell them on the streets as well, right in front of their shops. But I do think bigger sidewalks make for greater economic vitality. But it's not like we have a lot of empty storefronts downtown. We just do have some turnover, more than I would like to see in our restaurant space.
No, thank you for that. Unfortunately, we're coming up at the end of the hour, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe we can talk about it offline, but that's very, very helpful in helping to understand. If we didn't get to your question on this part of the webinar, please keep typing them in. I'll keep track. We'll make sure to follow up as best we can to get your questions answered if they haven't been answered live here. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I know we're at the hour, so again, want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have final thoughts, please fill out that survey. A couple of quick thank yous here. Thank you again to Ann T. and Robert M. Bass for your support in all of the toolkit pieces here. We're so grateful for your support, and just glad to be able to be here and be doing this. Thank you to our toolkit advisors. As many of you know, we had a lot of folks who helped us oversee the content in the handbook and the online resource library and in these webinars. So thank you to the toolkit advisors, to our contributing reviewers, to our case study participants. And you three from Haley are, we can't say thank you enough for participating both for the handbook and then, of course, for today. Thank you to our webinar series speakers. We just can't tell you how much we appreciate your time and sharing your story. We also want to thank you as participants for hanging with us over the course of these 4 weeks. Your participation, your input are really important in making this program successful. So we just want to keep hearing from you. And please, make sure to engage with us afterward. This is our contact information. We're here. This webinar series might be completed, but this work is ongoing, and we very much want to continue that. So with that, I just want to again thank you for our participants from Haley, Idaho. We really appreciate your time. Great story, great stuff. And of course, I want to say at Main Street America, thank you to the Project for Public Spaces for your partnership and for all your hard work in pulling the webinar together. It's been really fun.
Thank you for having us. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, woohoo. Great. Okay, so just for everybody, so you can watch the recordings on that website, and we really hope we'll be hearing from you. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.